Good morning, everyone. This is Patrick at Qdabra Software, and we are doing our weekly webinar once again this week. It's not every week, but we do it about 30 times a year, and we're really happy to have you here today. I'm especially pleased to be demonstrating this technique that we've demonstrated before. We've upgraded it, dynamic data connections, and the person who has actually created the technique, Don Frack, who's one of our long-term forms designers, is here, and he's going to actually help me with the demo today. He's really the reason why we're able to do the webinar this week. He's done all the heavy lifting with the sample forms and the demo, and I'm really happy to have Don here. Don, can you hear me okay?
Hello, everyone. Hey, Patrick. Yep, I can hear you.
Great. Well, before we get started, let's just do a couple of questions to you just to get the ball rolling here. How many data connections does your most complex form have? And don't go and look, just guess, right? We see some customers that have 40 or more data connections, lots of queries, and we're just kind of doing a couple of questions here at the beginning to get some context around what we're going to be talking about today. So it looks like about nobody is over 20, which is interesting. We got about kind of a split, 2/3 around less than 20, and then 40% less than 10, so it's 40-60 split. We're going to close this poll. We're going to ask you one more question, and that is about email notifications. So a lot of times you have workflows associated with your forms. You want to be able to send out a notification to somebody saying, hey, you've got something you got to do. But you need to add a link to that form. And if you're using FormZero, those links can be a little tricky to create. So we're going to show you a bonus technique today, how to do that. It's really easy, actually, using Power Automate or using DBXL email to send out the email. But creating a link can be a little tricky, so we're going to show how to do that in Demo 2 today. Okay, thanks a lot for that. So hopefully we're back to my screen. And yeah, so today's topic is basically the number one technique that we recommend when you're migrating your forms. So you're migrating your form from SharePoint 2013 to SharePoint Online, or if you're migrating your form from a site in SharePoint Online to another site. For example, if you're doing some development, like some testing, and you want to make sure everything's working great on one site, and then you want to move it to production where people are actually using it. So those are the two key scenarios that we have with dynamic data connections that we're trying to address. And the reason why is that InfoPath and your forms obviously have these, we use the data connections from InfoPath, so we're backward compatible with InfoPath. And those data connections are not easy to change. There is this thing called relative universal data connections, but most people aren't aware of them, and they're really hard to set up, and they don't really work very well. But there was this technique back in InfoPath where you could create a relative data connection, but it would be relative to the site that you were pointing it at. And so that would, in theory, kind of be dynamic, but no one could ever really get it to work right. So today we're going to show a technique on how to use FormZero to automatically update the techniques when the form loads so that it points to the site where the form was opened from. So obviously you need to have the data connections on the site, your lists, your library, whatever you're using. Typically you're querying a bunch of lists, you're submitting to a library, maybe you're submitting to a list. You might also be submitting to a web service. Well, that web service would not be probably relative to that site. It might be, like if you're using Get User Profile Service, that's another one. But if you're posting it to some other third-party site or to a SQL database, you wouldn't have to fix that up because that's not going to change, right? Or maybe it will if you're going from dev test to production. So then this technique would work for those as well. So that's the topic for today. And if you got questions, if you got comments, please feel free to use the comment area, and we'll see those coming in. We'll answer them as they come in. The main benefit to you is reducing the time to migrate. So once you've added this literally takes 5 to 10 minutes to add your forms. And then your forms can move from one place to another, and you don't have to update the data connections, which is great. And then, of course, that also reduces your maintenance costs because you don't have to worry about every time you do an update to your form, you don't have to worry about changing the data connections from dev test to production. So let's do demo 1, and I'm going to we're going to first start off with our SharePoint site. Don, you can see my screen, right? One last check
Yep.
here.
I see 2013.
Great. So this is our SharePoint 2013 site. We actually have it hosted in Azure. Everyone says it differently. And here you can see I've got a very simple patient consent form library. We can see we've been testing it. I can click new. This is InfoPath 2013. It opens up a form. I can submit the form. I can fill it in, add some information here, whatever. I can add an attachment someplace, somewhere, just for privacy, right? And we can submit it. It closes, submits. We should obviously have the form go back to the library. We didn't do that, but and then you can see that here's the form I just submitted with the wrong address. I don't know how that got changed, but let's see. Is it gonna work anyway? So that's the site that we're trying to migrate from. I need to go back to it. Okay, so here we are. It's submitted twice, so it's not updating it correctly, but you get the idea. This is a 2013 site, and we have this form library. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the library settings. I'm going to download that template, and we're going to migrate it to online, SharePoint Online with Forms here. So we get the pop-ups, and we're going to open up the form. And here's the form. You can see this is exactly the same form that we just had open. And so the first step is I need to add and Don, you're going to help me here, but I'm just going to go through and add the dynamic data connection is an XTP. So this is a XML template part that you can add to your forms that makes it easy to add rules, to add logic to your form. And you can see I have an old one in here, but I'm going to add the new one from Don. And the way you do this is you just go through this wizard, you click template part, and then you select it. Now, we also have this available to our Forms Designer customers. In fact, let me quickly show you what that looks like. I'm going to remove the previous one. Make sure I have the right version here. Yeah, I think that's the right one. And just as a point of reference, this is the Forms Designer. We're in Sprint 13 right now. We launched the beta in April. We are hoping to be completely feature parity with InfoPath Designer by the end of the year. You can see that we're still kind of in beta mode. There's still some kind of weird layout issues going on, but yeah, a lot of functionality actually. Rules, data connections, resource files, and you can do mapping to SharePoint lists. And we even have this XTP, dynamic data connections. It's so important that we just added it. We baked it in to the default designer here. And so, if you're going to add it, then you just, in the designer, if you have the designer installed, then you can do it from here as well. You can look at the notes on how to configure it. So that's one possibility. For today's demo, we're just going to do it in InfoPath as always. Because Forms Designer is backward compatible with InfoPath, we can do it, and we can continue to use InfoPath Designer until Microsoft breaks it completely. So once I've added the data connection, the dynamic data connection XTP, see there it is, and I'm going to just select it. Just put my cursor somewhere in the form and just select it. Now, Don, do you recommend that I create a separate view while I'm doing that?
A separate view.
I mean, is that
It's all right. It's going to be hidden.
okay? But we're going to get that. That's right. So we're going to just add it to the main view. You got a lot of views in your form. Don't worry about creating an extra view. Just go to your default view wherever you're at. It doesn't have to be the default view, because the dynamic data connections doesn't have any view components. It just has some instructions on how to configure it. So if I go in, I'm just put my cursor at the bottom of the screen, and I'm going to select dynamic data connections. And you can see it adds this section with these instructions in it. And hopefully everyone can see this. But basically, we've made it easy. It's a multi-step process here, but hopefully within a few minutes here, we'll be able to configure it. So we're just going to walk through this real quick. And this is what you do. You would inject your form with Q rules, and then you would add. So this form actually already has Q rules in it, I believe. So we don't have to do this first step. But if your form does not have Q rules, what you're going to do is you're going to upload it first to Forms Viewer. So if we go back to Forms Viewer here, we can actually upload it here. And then once you've uploaded it, if you're in Forms Designer, you can actually go down here to Q rules and you can inject it here. This form already has Q rules, so we don't have that option. If you're not in Forms Designer, if you're just using FormsViewer and InfoPath Designer, then what you do is you'd go to the form. Let's just pick, I think this is the right site. And we just go into the form, upload it obviously, create the name, and then using the classic designer, so this is the first version of the designer that we launched, which is still the default for FormsViewer. It's not, the beta is available if you install a separate app. It's pretty easy to install, but we are sticking with the alpha version until we're at 1.0. So you can go in here and you can just add, there's a button, inject Q rules, that will appear here if your form has not been injected with Q rules. And just as an example, I know this is going to take a little bit of extra time, but let me just go ahead and click New, Blank Form. This form obviously does not have Q rules in it. It doesn't do anything, doesn't have any data connections, but I'm going to add that data connection XTP anyway, just to show you what it looks like when the form is, I just clicked, I'm just going to call this one blank. So I'm going to upload this blank form here to Forms Designer. And we'll just take a look at what it shows when we go into the Design tab. So here you can see without Q rules, I get the ability to inject it with Q rules. That's the first step. You're going to inject it with Q rules. And then once you've done that, you're going to just come back to the template and you're just going to download it. And once you've downloaded it, then you're going to have Q rules in it. Now, Q rules is this extensions library with 150 different commands that extend InfoPath to use all these features that they didn't include, which should have been there. And we've added it to FormsViewer, so it's there by default. So it's no longer what we'd call a plugin, some code. It's not code anymore. It's just natively working in FormsViewer. So if you go in, you can see here now I've got Q rules. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to actually go in to the finish loading and you're going to add a rule here. And you're just going to follow these instructions, but you're going to add a rule to finish loading that runs on load. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to select finish loading, click new. Now this is the blank form. So I'm going to go back to the form that we're actually going to demo and do it here. And this is not the form, this is the one. We demoed this before. I'll leave the blank one open. So this is, I believe, the one where I want to add it. And we're going to basically add an action, and it has to set a field's value. So in order to trigger all this logic that we just added with the Dynamic Data Connections XTP, and I'll show you what that is in a minute, you're going to just add this one rule that goes into the XTP logic dynamic DCs and sets this run on load field to go. And Dawn, please let me know if I'm doing this correctly because I'm live in a demo. I'm going to make a mistake, obviously.
Looking good so far, Patrick.
I'm not going as fast as you. Now, to take a look at the what's in here, there's a lot of stuff, actually. There's a lot of rules in here to run. Basically, you're going to determine where the form is open from, and then it's going to update all these connections. And these connections are a separate step, and that's step 3 here. So you see here it says modify the rule name set rules edit located in the data connection source. Okay, so we're going to go in to that. So we have to actually go into
expand the Q rule stamp section.
Okay, great. And then I just need to fix up these 2 things, right?
Right.
There's the first one. And I need to go down here, and what do I need to do? I need to add
point that to the result node of the Q rules, the actual Q rules.
So right here, like that?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay.
And you missed the first one.
Oh.
The one that points to stop.
This one right here?
You should point the target field. No, to cancel. The target. Let's go back to the first one.
This here?
Nope, nope, nope. The first action where it says where it points to stop.
Right here?
The first, yeah.
Okay.
The target node, change this to the command field of key rules.
I always miss this step, and then I wonder why it didn't work. Okay, and that's good right there?
Yep.
Okay. And then I have to
Go
update
to the third action.
okay, update these three, and this is the success node, so we can get the actual result of the run. This one, right? Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And then the last one is this error node, so we can get the error information if there was an error running the command. Is that right?
Yep, Patrick.
Okay. Done. Now what? Okay, so once you've done that, now we need to do this because we're running all these commands, and you'll see these in a minute, and we need to be able to repoint it. So by taking those 3 or 4 easy steps, all the logic here that's running underneath in this secondary data source that was added as part of the dynamic data connections, you get all this for free. So you get there's 5 different things we're doing. We're querying the lists. Obviously, if you've got a list connection, you're going to edit these. You're going to enable these and add more of these query lists if you've got more than one list. So in this case, are we querying any lists on? This form doesn't query lists, right? So we can ignore that. But we do want to update the submit libraries, right? You there? So we're going to update this.
Mm-hmm.
And is that that's the only the other stuff I need to do, right? Because we're only doing a submit from this form. We're not doing any querying, right?
Right, but this is the blank form, so it doesn't have a submit action.
Oh, that's right. I'm in the wrong place. Did I just update all the blank ones? I thought I was doing it from here. Okay, so you're going to walk through these steps, and I obviously completely botched the demo because I was in the wrong form. But you can see here that we've got these different connections. So if you're using query list connection, you're going to do those updates. If you're doing the query library, you're going to do those. The patient consent form only has a submit. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like after we've gone through and added these. So once we've added all these connections and gone through it, and you haven't made a mistake like me, then what you'll do is you'll save your form and you'll update it to Forms Viewer, and then you can open it from Forms Viewer. So we've already done this. So let's go ahead and take a look at the form that I think this is the right location. So this is the Demo 1 patient consent form, and Dawn's already added the dynamic data connections to here. So if I click on this and open it, we'll see that the background image as well is different. But more importantly, if I look at the debug, you're going to see these commands running that load the resource. Now, I don't see the dynamic data connections in here, Dawn.
This one doesn't have it yet.
Okay.
So if you click submit, this is going to fail.
Okay.
I could upload the one which is working.
Okay, great. Let's do that. And call it something different, like call it Demo 1, just so we can show them something different. So let's just show this isn't working here. So this is the form without it does look different because we've got a CSS in the form that you didn't see in InfoPath. So Forms Designer allows you to add these background images, these nice curved boxes and whatnot. We've also got the ability to add signature boxes and so on. So the form is slightly different when it opens in Forms Viewer because of those added features that we've added. And Don's going to upload that. While he's doing that, I'm going to show you that submit fails. There's the failure right there. So you can see that's because we did not fix up the data connections, and it's pointing to the old site. So that's actually good to demo because that's what's going to happen if you don't fix up the data connections. Now, if we had query list items on load, you'd see an error there too, but we don't have anything we're querying on load yet. So, Don, are you ready to?
Yep, should be there.
Let's take a look.
Go back to templates.
Okay,
the one
so
with
this
dynamic
one
DC
is 2 versions greater, so that looks like the right one. And if I just open this form now, and if we look at what happened on load, there's a lot of more stuff happening. And this is the logic in the dynamic data connections XTP that goes through, and it's basically we're just updating that one change submit URL to point to the new location. And so the form actually doesn't change. If I go to this form and download it and look at the form in the designer, you'll see that the data connection is still pointing to that QSHP 2013 site for the submit. There it is, right there, QSHP 2013. So even though it's still pointing to that old site, because we're opening it and running those rules, we're dynamically fixing up the data connection to point to the new site where it's open from, which is webinars 2021 11/01/21, almost a palindrome. And you can see it's successful. Now there's a bunch of other steps that are going on before that. You can just ignore the delete. This is just some logic we use to clean up. If you've got a lot of data connections, we need to, and you're not using them, for example, to query libraries or lists, then we just delete those so you don't have that default row to change. If you wouldn't see these deletes if you have a lot of data connections. In addition, we have to get the location where the form's open from. So those are the only differences. Everything else is the same as before. Any questions on this? Let's just fill it out and make sure it works. And once again, because this is Forms Viewer, we have a lot of cool controls we can add. We've got the styling. Obviously, attachments work just fine. And now when I submit, with any luck, we have success. And I can go back to the library and take a look at it. So let's go to the library and see if my form got submitted. Now you can configure the library to open the form directly from there. And that's the best practice. So I opened it from Forms Viewer, but you can certainly configure the library using either our classic UI configure command or the extensions for modern, and they're both available. Both of those how-tos are available on our InfoPath Dev site. So I can click on this, and hopefully we haven't configured this, so obviously it's not going to open in Forms Viewer. So we need to run that extensions to configure the library. But you can see that there's the one that I just submitted a few seconds ago right there. So it is submitting. That's great. Now let's take a look at, let's go back to our slides here real quick because we're running out of time. So how did we do it? We added the XCP to the form. We injected it with Q rules. We added this rule to run on load. We configured the data connections. Actually, I failed miserably, but you won't because you'll actually read through it and you won't be demoing at the same time. And we have a debug section in the form that we use to verify the commands are running successfully. That's really important. Then we upload it to Forms Viewer and verified it. Now, if you don't know how to add the debug section to your form, you can see this form already has it here. Let's just go ahead and delete it. And what you would do is you would go into the make sure your mouse is in the right place. Can I do anything right today? Okay, and then you'll go into Qdabra rules, and you'll just drag and drop this history section in to some place in your form. Ideally, it's a place in your form that is hidden unless you click on a button. In this case, you've got this button that's controlling it. So that's how you add the debug section to your form, and then you'll see all the commands running when you open your form. And then once you've verified everything's working, you can delete the section, upload again, and so you don't see it. Or you can have a hide show like we have here. Okay, any questions on that? We've got one more quick demo for you. This one's going to be a lot quicker than the last one, but let's quickly pause. Don, any comments on that demo? What did I miss?
Out of the bone.
Okay.
So it's good.
Yeah, so Don's done all the hard work here, and I'm just the guinea pig, failing miserably to actually follow the instructions. But the second demo should be a little easier. We're not actually gonna we're gonna I guess we can show this. Don, do you want to share out and show them where this extra thing is? So we've added this really important. First let's talk about why this is important. So in addition to dynamically configuring your data connections, you obviously want to send an email and you want to have a link that is dynamic that points to the site where your form was submitted. And so let's just take a quick, I'll just run the demo and then Don's going to show you how it actually works under the covers. So if I go back to my templates here on my demo site, you'll see I've got demo 2 here. So we've got a slightly more recent version of the form. And if I submit this one, we're going to get an email. So let's just go ahead and submit this. and we'll add a signature. Let's make this somehow unique, and we'll capture the signature, submit the form, and okay, its form is closed. We've got a slight anomaly here with the UI that we need to fix in our form, but the form is submitted now to a list and the library, and I believe that the list that we're using for the Power Automate, what's it called, Don? Is it this one, right?
That one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then this list is actually, there's going to be a row generated here, hopefully, a few seconds ago. There's the one right there at the bottom. And I should be getting an email notifying me that this was submitted. So let's see if that came through. Not yet. I did see this yesterday, but sometimes the Power Automates can take a few minutes to run. There it is. Okay, so here's the form. Very simple email. We should obviously add a lot more body and text to this. But the key point of the demo is you've got this link. Now this link is using our spam protector here, so you can see that it's a protected link, but it still works just fine. And you'll see that once the email protection runs, it opens the link, and there's the form I just submitted with the long line at the bottom. So that's how it works. So Don, I'm going to make you the presenter, and you can show how we're doing it under the covers.
Okay. So thank you, Patrick. I'll go ahead and open up the form with the submit link, which submits to the list and generates the link. So what we added, it's actually the same form, but in the submit logic, which is here, okay, I added this generate forename logic, and it's going to create this form name. So the form name is going to be now plus the current user, and then it's going to be used for generating the form link. So for the form link, there are two options. So one is if you already have a form name, which is a form name being generated, you can use that to trigger the generate form link logic, or just set the trigger to go and it's going to generate its own form name, because the form name is required for generating the links, and it needs to have that pointed in the library.
So you're
The
saying,
next action.
sorry, just to clarify that, Don. So you're saying that if they're using a unique form name already, like let's say instead of using the date plus the username, they're using like some number. If they've already got that in their form, they can override the default here of the using
Yeah.
the, okay. And how do they do that again? They just go in to the
They just go in here and then trigger this node to either the form name if they already have that logic. So it's going to get the form name here, or if the form name is blank, it's going to generate its own.
I see. So they just have to set
here.
that form name, and then it won't use the default.
Yeah.
And where
So
would they
if
set that
it's
form name? Would they set it at the second rule there? They would just change that second rule.
it's going to first set the form name here.
I see.
If it's a form name and if it's not equal to go, so it's going to set the form name. And then if form name is blank, it's going to get the value from, this is not really needed. If the form name is blank, it's going to generate its own. If it's not blank, it's going to skip this rule and set the form link using the form name.
Got it. So where would, if they have their own form name in the form, that second rule is what they would change. Is that right?
No. They just need to set the trigger to either the form name
I see.
or go.
And is that okay? I see. So it's either go or the form name, and you've got instructions in the XCP
Yeah.
to that effect.
So there are two scenarios here. One is setting it to the form name. Second one is just setting it to go.
Got it. So they want the default behavior because they don't have a current form name, then they would just go. That's easy. Otherwise, they'd point it to a field in their main data source.
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
great. Thanks for clarifying.
And it's going to populate that field over here. So if you don't have a form name field, you can use this for your submit to library data connection. The next thing that I added is the submit to list. So I created a mapping for this. So the mapping is, let me see. So it's just a simple mapping. And as you can see here, it's pointing to a different site. It's pointing to our training and not the webinar URL. And that's what the dynamic data connection is doing. So aside from updating the submit to library here, which is this one, and then it has its logic to configure it to point to the current site location. This one is also doing the same thing. So it's going to point to the current URL. And before you add these configuration, you also need to enable these features here at the change connection node. And then when you're done, that's all you need to do, and you'll just have to upload it to your form viewer.
Okay, so you're mapping it to a list, and you've got a mapping in the form that is controlling that. Can you show them the mapping UI in the alpha designer? This is XML. Obviously, this is kind of daunting to see this XML, but this is actually the mapping file, right?
Right, but this is going to fail if we go into um,
Oh, because it's got the old site on it.
yeah,
I see. So we're not
yeah,
because of
that's
the
the
yeah.
problem.
That's an interesting point. If you're using dynamic data connections and you've got a SharePoint list mapping, which is typically a QRules command, forms your command, then you won't be able to edit that in the designer unless actually just go and show them the failure unless you update it the XML to point to it. So that's one of the things that we haven't actually added to dynamic data connections yet is if you are using one of these special QRules, map your XML data to a list like Don's using, then the SharePoint list mapping won't show it here, or it will, but it will be pointing to the wrong site. List does not exist. Okay, great. And to fix that, then they would just go in. I mean, obviously they can ignore it because the dynamic data connection is going to fix it up on the fly. But if they really wanted to fix it, they'd have to go in here and update the. What would they update? They just update the last thing. Okay, the SharePoint URL. Got it. Okay, great. Well, I know we've gone a little bit over, Don, so thanks again for putting this wonderful sample together. And everything is in the instructions, so if it was confusing to you, obviously I'm with you because I was confused when I was trying to do it. So but it's really not that hard. It really should be 10 to 15 minutes to run. Once you get the hang of it, you'll probably have to read the instructions again like I do. And then if you have any questions, you can just email us. But the goal here was to make it easy so that you don't have to spend a lot of time messing with your data connections. So just to recap, the benefit of setting the form link is to get that email link and so that people can open the form without having to go into the library. Dawn explained how to do it. And that's pretty much it for the webinar this week. We appreciate you being here. Any questions for us at this time? I know we've had a little bit of a bumpy road with our demos today. That's my fault. But hopefully you took something away. We're going to send you the package of contents, the sample XTP, the Dynamic Data Connections XTP, which is included in Forms Designer if you have that. But if you're using Impact Designer like most of us still are, then you'll add that there. We'll also send you the patient consent form, and then it also includes some cool things like the CSS to show the better UI design. And then we'll also send you the presentation deck. I just want to, while we're waiting for a few questions, just want to briefly point out that we did a webinar in July to talk about migration of forms. And this is, you can go to our YouTube channel, you can look at the migration. I think it was July 7th or so, but it's on our YouTube channel if you just search for migration this year. And basically what we're talking about here is the fix-up form. So when you're migrating from 2013 to online or from one online site to another, you've got these steps that you're running. And the middle step is to fix up forms. That's where we're doing the dynamic data connections and adding better looking layout or whatever, configuring your library to open forms directly. I mean, that's obviously something we didn't do in this step, but so you can go back to this one. You can actually go, look at how we're doing that. And there's some interesting notes in here on the data connection stuff and the other stuff. So highly recommend that you take a look at that if you haven't already. So we got a question from Kathy. What is the cost per open? Okay, so FormSeer is, I think you're talking about the usage, the licensing cost for FormSeer, and our goal with FormSeer is to make it the least expensive replacement for InfoPath by an order of magnitude, if not two. The way we do that is we support the old format, so you don't have to migrate all of your old forms to Power Apps, which can take a lot of time. Obviously, Power Apps is awesome. We love Power Apps for certain things, but if you're using forms already, rather than spend the countless hours and time, and then you have to migrate all your data. So all of that stuff you don't have to do. So that's one huge savings. But the other huge savings is we're usage based. We're not charging based on the site or the users. So unlike other vendors of forms technology, FormSeer is not actually, we're not trying to make a lot of money with it. But because we host it in Azure, because Qdabra is a consulting company, but because we host the tool in Azure, we have to charge for usage. And typically that means whenever you open the form. And so our target with usage is less than 10 cents per open. That's the target. So if you look at the pricing for FormSeer, and you kind of threw me a curveball, Kathy, but I'll go there anyway and show you the FormSeer pricing. So here's the FormSeer page. If we look at pricing here, you can see that you've got these different plans. We don't have any limits, expirations, or anything like that. So if you're installing FormSeer, we're just not going to stop working after 3 months. We might bug you and ask you to start or pay us something. But the $12.45, you divide that by 12,000, and you're going to have about 10 cents an open per form. So 12,000 is 1,000 times 12 months. This is an annual plan. So it's at the low end, it's 10 cents or so. But as you go up, it goes less. So this is like 4 or 5 cents an open because it's 4 times the number of opens for just twice the cost. And then 5 times, so now we're down to 1 or 2 cents an open, and then unlimited VIP, then you can get down to less than 1 cent per open. So the idea is less than 10 cents per open. So hopefully that, thanks for that comment. Yeah, it is a great price, and you can't beat it anywhere else. And if you can, we'll lower it. How's that? So then another question from Chris here is this data connection change versus change URL. Right. Okay. So, Chris, I'm trying to read into that question comment what you want me to talk about. I think that let's just go back to the form for a second here, and let's take a look at the rules that are running. And you can see here that there's no change connection URL here because this form doesn't automatically fix up a query on load. But if we had a form that was querying a list or a library, you'd see change connection URL. So usually with dynamic data connections, we're running the change connection URL command, which is specific for all the query connections. But in this case, because this form doesn't have any query connections, it only has a submit, you'll see change submit URL there instead. So that's kind of confusing if you're used to using dynamic data connections like you are, and you're seeing change connection URL. But your form should have a change submit URL too, to make sure that submit is dynamic. Hopefully I answered your question, Chris. I don't know if I did or not, but if I didn't, now's your time to say blah. Anyway, that's it for our webinar this week. I just want to thank Don again for the wonderful stewardship on the samples and his demo expertise, and being here at Qdabra for 10 or more years. Thanks, Don. I really appreciate you being here. Just a quick shout out. Thanks, Kathy, for prompting me on the advertisement for Qdabra forms. We are the only ones that support the existing InfoPath format, which means migration cost is very minimal. But in addition, we're much lower cost for usage. And we're a consulting company, so we make money by serving you, not by trying to sell you products. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks again. We look forward to seeing you next week. We got a few short questions in the survey, just 3 or 4, and then we'll send you the kit, the samples, the presentation. Next week, we're going to be talking about the new release of FormsViewer. That's 6.2, which is coming out tomorrow or today. I guess it's today in Europe, tomorrow in the US. We've got a whole bunch of new release notes to talk about next week and demos to show you new features in FormsViewer. Hope you can make it. Have a great one. Talk to you soon. Thanks again. Thanks, Don.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Patrick. Bye-bye.